All right, so I want to start again by just welcoming everyone and just acknowledging that I'm broadcasting live from Jajawarong country in central Victoria and pay my respects to elders of that country, past, present, and emerging, and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are on the call today or watching or listening on Catch Up. So, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again for another exploration of the internal world and of the present moment. And today I wanted to start again by just closing our eyes or finding somewhere we can look where we won't be distracted. And just shifting our attention away from stories and thoughts and onto the breath, onto present moment, and onto noticing what it feels like to breathe in and what it feels like to breathe out. And today, I wanted to really explore how we use curiosity in our practice. And we can start that by just getting really curious about the breath. It's something that just happens and that we take for granted. But let's take a moment to really watch it and really notice, what does it feel like as the breath comes in? What does it feel like as the breath goes out? Where in the body do you feel that? And it might be pretty obvious that it's there in your mouth or nose as the air comes in. You can feel that. What does it feel like as your chest expands? What does it feel like as the air goes out again and your chest contracts? And again, we can notice that there's something happening. There's breath, there's sensation. We can notice that that sensation seems to arise in this vast emptiness inside us. And we can notice that we're there, or you're there, as the awareness that's watching. So as you get curious about the breath, you can notice that, or sense yourself as the awareness, as the very awareness that's watching the breath. Because all that happens, all sensation comes and goes. Everything that arises will disappear again, or will change shape. The one thing in your experience that never goes anywhere or never changes is that awareness that you are. It's the awareness itself. So as we get curious about the breath, let's also get curious about what's happening in the mind. And if you're just joining, just take a moment, get yourself settled. Everyone's on mute, so there's no worries there. Just find a quiet place, close your eyes when you're ready. And we're just following the breath, bringing curiosity to that. And curiosity to what we call the mind. So let's look inside and see, can we find this thing that we call the mind? We talk about our mind all the time. And we might think it's a thing that is in our head somewhere. Or we might think of it as something else. But it's worthwhile really looking inside and seeing, what is it that we call the mind or my mind? And if you really look, I think what you'll notice, unless your experience is radically different to mine, what I think you'll notice is that inside, what we call inside, is this vast open space in which things arise. And within that space, thought arises as well. So we say, I'm thinking, or some people say, I'm being thought. We say, I'm thinking, when in reality, there's this space and thoughts just come out of that. We don't produce them. And we can know that because if I ask you, how do you produce a thought? None of us can answer that. But when we watch and we breathe and we just curious, we see that thoughts just seem to grow out of this emptiness. They just appear like some magic trick. And then they seem to disappear. And it's almost like this vast blue sky out of which a cloud appears. And we know when we look at the sky that the water vapor that becomes cloud is there. We know that it's all around us. And yet when it condenses enough, we call it cloud. And I thought maybe something like that. That this empty open space inside us It condenses into a particular form, which might come as words or might come as images. Or other senses, other sensory information. But if we look inside, there's nothing we can point to and call the mind or my mind. There is just this emptiness that's the birthplace of all thought and sensation. And in Buddhism, they call this emptiness. And they say emptiness is form, and form is emptiness. Because this emptiness it's like that water vapor, it's condensing itself into these shapes. And then the shapes seem to dissolve back into the emptiness. Or in Taoism, they call it the Great Void, out of which everything arises and into which everything disappears. And when we hear those terms in those traditions, we might think it's something exotic or strange or far away that we could never experience. But they're really just describing what our inner experience is when we really stop and look at it. Now, as you listen to these words, it's really important not to try to figure them out or analyze them logically. Because this direct experience can't be understood through thought. We can only use this natural curiosity to watch it and look at it and try to understand what's happening here. So we have this vast empty space inside that we're watching, that you're watching. And then these stories arise out of that space. And when we were very young, we didn't identify with these stories. We didn't create a me, a mental image, what I call a story self, out of these thoughts that just came and went. And it was probably a pretty magical experience. But as we get older, it doesn't take long. This mental image, this story self, starts to seem real. And what's happening is you, the awareness, is believing itself to be this mental image. And all that story self is, if you look at it, if you watch it, it's just made up of memory that's been interpreted and identified with. So an event is remembered, and then it's given a value, good, bad, positive, negative, up, down. And then I, as the awareness, identify with that and say, this is what kind of person I am. I'm a good person, bad person. Often it's not usually that black and white, but it's, as we get older, it's more subtle. I'm very much like this. I'm too much like that. So this story self arises, and there seems to be this consistent voice that I call the storyteller that feeds us this narrative, feeds you, the awareness, this narrative. And the only aim of the story self, of the storyteller, is to hold on to your attention. It's like I'll stereotype, it's like an advertising executive, or the image of it we have of a maybe 80s advertising executive who does not care about you at all, but just wants to do whatever it takes to grab your attention and hold it for as long as possible. That's their only aim. And whether they do that through upsetting you and shocking you, or whether they do that through trying to make you feel good or happy, they don't mind, as long as they hold your attention. And this voice in your head is just the same. And if we look at advertising, it's a great place to learn. What holds attention best is what feeds a sense of lack, a sense of not enough, and a sense of need to change or improve. That's what holds our attention. Because the natural urge of the universe is progression and evolution and improvement. And so you, the awareness, has been confused into believing that you need to be better, that you need to have more, that there's something missing from your life. That's the reason why you're not as happy as you want to be. And we all have a sense somewhere, however deep down, that we should be happy, that it's our right to be happy, that we were born to be happy. And yet we don't experience that always. And so and please keep feeling your breath as you listen. Just let these words pass through. When we look, and when we see that self-image and it appears to be missing something or lacking something, and then the storyteller tells us that that's why you're suffering, that's why you're not happy, not as happy as you want to be, because this thing is missing in your life. And when the thing that's missing, or that that the person believes is missing is something material, like more money or a better car or a better house, then we sometimes see that as shallow, and we sometimes see that as a bit ridiculous. But even if the thing that's missing is spiritual awakening, or it's something we see as more altruistic, the pattern and the process is the same. Is that the voice is saying to you, this is wrong with you, or this is wrong with your experience. The voice is feeding you a story, painting an image of you, a story self that's incomplete. And what happens is when your attention is absorbed in that story self, then you suffer, then you feel uncomfortable. And you can know that because when you're fully absorbed in this present moment, the suffering disappears, even though your situation hasn't changed. But what happens is your attention goes from the story self to reality. And the sense of lack immediately starts to drop away. There might still be stress in the body from that torture that we've been experiencing. But the stress from that sense of lack drops away immediately. So what happens is attention becomes absorbed in the story self, and that feels uncomfortable. And we interpret the discomfort as being caused by the sense of lack, the thing that's missing. And so then we become externally focused on trying to fill that lack, trying to get the thing that's missing. And when are we going to get that thing? Well, of course we don't have it now, so we're going to get it in the future. So time, the idea of time anyway, becomes more and more important. So if we're sitting here right now, just with our attention, or with attention resting in this space, knowing that you are the awareness that watches, that you're not the thoughts, or you're not the story self, knowing yourself as the awareness. What does that awareness need in order to be happy? Does it need some more money? Does it need some more stability? Does it need a change of president or prime minister? Got Australians and Americans on the call today. What does the awareness need? To be itself, to be content. Does the awareness say, well, sometime in the future when I have these things, then I'll be happy, but right now I can't? The awareness that you are lacks nothing, needs nothing, is complete and whole and perfect as it is. And this is why I suggest that we don't come to mindfulness we don't approach it from the point of view of self-improvement, becoming a better person. Because when we say, I want to become a better person, what we mean is, I want my story self to be more like this or like that. We can't be, you as you are can't become a better person. You can act in alignment with that awareness, where you can act out of belief. It's the only two options. And we can't make ourselves do either. We can only notice what we're doing, what's happening. So we have this storyteller inside us. We seem to. That's this voice that's continually whispering or shouting about lack and about need and about what's wrong. And if you look, and don't want to spoil the story for anyone, but if we look for that storyteller, we look for the one who's telling the story. We can't find them either. Because when I say the storyteller, it's a useful kind of metaphor. But it's easy to start to imagine that there's this true self, the awareness, and that there's this false self that exists in there that's telling us stories. But actually there's just thought arising in space. And what I notice, or what I say is that those thoughts are conditioned by past experience. So they're conditioned by the things people said to us, the things people did, things that we did, the things that, what's happened in this life so far. The thoughts are conditioned by that in the same way that clouds are created by the prevailing weather pattern in the place. And they're very different in the desert than they are in the rainforest, in the tropics. They're conditioned by sun and wind and mountains and lakes and rivers and oceans. But essentially, those clouds are all the same. They're all the same substance. We know that. And thought is like that too. Thought is it's this one substance conditioned by the weather patterns of your life experience. And so there's no particular person that's creating them or thinking them or telling the story. They just arise out of nowhere based on conditions, and then they disappear again. But this sense of identity and of separation and of all of that, it all comes from this primary confusion that thought, that awareness is identified with those thoughts. So in this practice, we don't need to do anything about those thoughts. We don't need to change or get rid of them, of course. But we also don't need to defeat the storyteller or dissolve the story self. Because when we look with curiosity at this inner experience, it becomes very clear after a while that the story self is just imagination. And so if we imagine, it's like we're imagining a problem and then spending our lives trying to solve it. It's like if you imagined that your roof was leaking and then spent months or years trying to fix it unsuccessfully. Or if you have a dream that you have some terrible illness, and then when you wake up, you act as if the dream's real and you try to treat that. This is what we're doing. So what we need to do is not dissolve it or fix it or get rid of it. But what's happening here, we don't need to do it, but what's happening here is we're waking up out of the dream. We're waking up out of the dream of identity, of story self. And how this waking up happens in this space where we are, in this group, how this waking up happens is that we become aware that we're dreaming. We become aware that we're imagining. And this is, sure you've all experienced this when you're in a dream, you're asleep and you're in a dream, and partway through, there's some terrible things happening or some frustrating things happening. And then it comes to you somehow that, oh, actually, I'm asleep and this isn't actually happening, it's a dream. And very often when that happens, we wake up straight away, or at least the dream loses its power to bother us. And this is what's happening here, is that we're noticing the fact that we've been caught up in a dream. Sometimes pleasant, sometimes nightmarish, sometimes usually a bit of both. And that whenever some new event has happened, we've interpreted it through the lens of this story self. And then that's added to the story self, it's added to our sense of identity, it's made it seem more dense. And so, the biggest shock of my life was probably when I started looking inside and trying to find this I and this me that I kept referring to and I still keep referring to. Trying to find that inside and find something solid I can point to and say, there I am. It was incredibly disorienting until I realized that I'm the one who's watching this identity, this imagined identity arise and disappear. And so our true practice is not about being good at concentration. It's not about being calm. It's not about being what's called a good person even. It's about really looking inside, trying to understand what's true for you. What is really going on in your experience? And so if there's something today that I've said that doesn't fit with your experience, and that's okay. But make sure it doesn't fit with your experience and not with your beliefs. And if it just doesn't fit with your beliefs, then I'd encourage you to really take your attention inside and explore and find out what is going on in there. I talk about these three elements of things arising, the space out of which they arise, into which they disappear, and the awareness that watches. And in my experience, those three elements are all that's present everywhere. It's present inside when thoughts come and go and emotions come and go. It's present outside when a tree grows, when the grass grows, and then it seems to dissolve, it dies off and dissolve back into the earth, back into this nothingness. And so I can only speak from my experience. And it's really very important that you verify everything that I say within your own experience. You go inside and check. And that's all I want to encourage today or ever is deep curiosity about what is going on. What is the truth about my life and who I am? And so I want to invite you to just take some of those questions and those curiosities away with you this week and not try to figure them out as in understand them through words and thoughts, but just to experiment with looking inside and seeing what's happening. What's your reality? What's going on for you? And learning to distinguish between that reality and what we might call belief or assumption or thinking. So I invite you to just bring your attention back into the room. As always, feel free to stretch if that feels right. A special guest here. Just not sure about those headphones, I don't think. And so, sometimes I talk about this as not the self-improvement path. She's going to come and headbutt me, I think. That's what she likes to do. It's not a path of self-improvement, but the path of loss where we're unlearning, we're undoing conditioning, we're letting go, not letting go, but we're seeing through identity and things are falling away. And that our freedom comes not because we've gained something, but because the thing that was getting in the way is seen through and it dissolves on its own. And so, I think it's worth remembering that we're not trying to learn something or add something, which is what we usually do as humans, is that sense of lack, and I'll add something. But we're really wanting to understand what's going on now and really appreciate that. So I'm going to stop talking and just open up the floor. Any questions, comments, or how you experienced that time together.
Ollie, who can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, who else is because I've only got a picture of you and me here. Are there other people at the moment?
Yeah, so we've got Jen is here today.
Why can't I get them? What haven't I?
No, you're right. I've just spotlighted my video because I'm recording, so everyone else doesn't show up on YouTube.
Oh, okay, that's all right. Yeah.
That's all. So we've got Jen. Christina's here from Texas again, and we've got Nara, who's Bendigo as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late getting on. I had a big hiccup.
That's totally fine.
Yeah, I had to put Zoom on my iPad, and I had to remember passwords, and but I didn't get like too stressed, I was pretty pleased with the way I handled it. So
yeah, good on you. Good on you. Yeah.
Hi everyone. Hi Ollie. I was a bit late getting on too. Children.
There's no such thing as late here.
No, it doesn't matter anyway. It seems to be that you just pick right up wherever you are, and because it's a practice of doing this now, more regularly. We're doing it regularly. You seem to be able to slip into the moment really well. Just the breathing, and that settles things, and the noticing. You do say a lot of things though, Ollie, and one of the things I'm wondering, some of it's quite complex. So I try not to go into any of those streams of ideas that you share. Interesting though, and maybe that will sit with me throughout the day, and something I'll come back to. Otherwise, from these recordings, do you put a bit of a summary of the things that you covered in the session? I think you might do you?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I don't remember what I've said afterwards.
Oh, well, that's there you go. So it's okay, we won't remember it all.
No, and I don't want to, I wouldn't encourage people to remember it as much as to use it as a prompt for your own curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've found through my own practice was, like, I used to listen to Eckhart Tolle a lot, talking about, he uses the word being and presence. And for years I kind of went, that sounds great. What the hell is it? What's he talking about? Or he talked about space, and I was like, yeah, space. Where is that? And so, yeah, I think a lot of what I'm saying is, I really want you to look inside and notice. And some of it's just runs contrary to what we've been taught and what we believe. And so, the important thing is that you're looking inside and checking what's true for you, and going beyond just belief or assumption to, well, what is my actual experience.
Yeah, that's helpful. Good to define whether it's your experience.
Are there particular bits that could use some clarification though? Because that's always.
I'll come back to you about that. nothing that's popping up again just now. Thank you though. Anyway,
yeah, no worries.
It's interesting. It's interesting that, this week after last week, because last week we were talking about, our practice and how it goes in cycles. And we had talked about how sometimes we are practicing really strongly, and then sometimes it kind of wanes and it comes and it goes, right?
Yeah.
I guess that whole, like, I've had some times in my life where everything was trying to find a better me, trying to build a better me. And so you question everything and you constantly believe that I've got to work on me all the time. And, you know, it's so nice when you can reach a point and you say, you know what, I don't have to work on me all the time to be me.
Mm. Mm.
And so, you know, I heard strains of that throughout everything you were saying tonight, and it just hits home, you know, to go back and just take a step back, and you don't have to be constantly criticizing yourself or working on yourself. It's okay to just be. And when you do that, you know, the story kind of falls away. But that's kind of what you were talking about last week too, where it's like, wait a second, who am I without my story? Who am I without my unconscious chaos and without, you know, those fears? And so you had asked a question on the page earlier about a difficult moment or something that you're dealing with, and what are you if you just let go and experience it? Like, where are you? And it's kind of the same thing. It's like to let go of whatever it is that you're holding on to is one of the most freeing things, but at the same time, it's one of the scariest things on earth, because you have to really experience and deal with all of that. So that's kind of hit home with me tonight, at least.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, I think we're so used to having a strong sense of identity based on that story self, that whether that's whether we like that identity or not, it's still, you know, it's like that relationship that you get into where it might not be serving you, or it might not be fulfilling you, but it's still something. And the alternative of just being here without a story and without a strong sense of identity based on those thoughts is, you know, can be pretty terrifying when we're used to that as our kind of normal. But it's like, well, when you're when you're in the garden and you're not thinking about me, and I, and all of that, and or when you're painting, or when you're cooking, or when you're playing with kids, or, you know, whatever you love doing, people lose their identity and they're not really aware of themselves in the way that we usually are. You know, when we're thinking, oh, I'm like this, I'm like that, this happened to me, I hope that happens to me, I hope that doesn't happen to me. And those I thoughts are kind of so front and center. when you're just pulling up weeds, and or you're just in the sunshine, or you're just out walking, or you're just at the beach, then, you know, we believe that our sense of joy and freedom comes from those activities or those places, when, you know, in my experience, it comes because the I thoughts aren't, you know, front and center anymore. And so, you know, what we fear, or what the voice in our head fears, you know, is that loss of identity and that disorientation is actually, usually it's the thing that we enjoy most in our lives, those activities where we forget ourselves.
Mm.
And where we do it just for its own sake, you know. Yeah, we might think I'm pulling weeds because I should pull weeds, or because of when you really get lost in it, when you lose your sense of self in it, you keep doing it just because you see it there, and you just, you know, it's quite natural. So yeah, I can relate to that sense of fear of, and that sense of maybe disorientation. But a lot of that's just us, just the thoughts, you know, projecting what will it be like if I don't have this. It's not, you know, the reality of it is really grounded and centered. And it's just like those times in your life where you've been completely, and it could be on a holiday where you're out of your environment and you're in Italy or somewhere and you're really looking at the architecture and you're really enjoying the place and you're really alive, and you don't have this sense of this strong sense of self that's running the show as much. You know, those kind of experiences, that's how we can experience just what we call mundane daily life, when we're not lost in that strong sense of story self. And I know sometimes the more words I use, the more it starts to go around and around and maybe get a little complex. And that's it. So if that's if you're thinking that, that's okay. But I think it's just coming back to what you said, Christina. It's like let's experiment with that gently, and let's experience that for ourselves and see, well, is it really disorienting? Is it really scary? Or is that just, what that voice was telling me? And I think anytime it starts to become messy and complicated in your head, you just come back to, breath and body, and just come back to, the basics.
I like what you said about when we were young, we didn't have the storyteller. It was kind of so free and easy, I think.
Yeah. And if
Then
you
it
think
changes.
back, I think for most of us, if you think back, even there's that progression over time where even as teenagers still do a lot of stuff just for fun. Most of what they do is just for fun because they enjoy it. And there's still that sense of, stronger identity and angst and all that creeping in. But compared to adults, they do a lot more stuff just hanging out with friends because they enjoy it. Whereas as an adult, you get your 5-year plan, or you get your 2-week plan, or you get your to-do list or whatever, and that starts to run the show. And
I still have a to-do list.
To-do list is fine. But it's like we start to feel guilty about just enjoying ourselves and just enjoying life. If it's not serving some productive purpose towards, my future goals or whatever. So you kind of see that, and the further you go back into childhood, or you look at children, you see that they're just doing what's in front of them because that's what's calling their attention, and not because they've got something we don't, but because we've got something they don't. We've got this strong sense of identity and future and all of that. So I think it's a really good point to come back to, Levelese.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Speaking of drawing my attention, I might draw my attention back to the children. Although they're here with me, but I'm going to get their attention away from screens. So we haven't had a quiet sitting here with me looking at a screen off and on. So thanks, Ollie. See you next time.
No worries, Jen. Thank you.
Thanks.
And
Yep. Bye, everyone. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
So, Christina, you got children there too. That's beautiful. It's hot there. Hi.
My 8-year-old. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
That's life.
That's life. That's it. Are there any more questions or comments before we kind of wrap up for today?
No, I'm good.
No, you're good. All right. Well, for people watching on catch up at the moment, we're doing this every Tuesday at 11 o'clock Melbourne time. And if you jump on my Facebook group, which is just Mindfulness with Ollie Doyle, I usually post when we're going to be on there. And they're going to be heaps more organised this week of posting it earlier so people can plan ahead. It's going to be great. And otherwise, thank you everyone for joining in today. I'm just going to pause the recording there. Stop it.